All right, so the first thing I want to go over is we've talked about p-value. The last couple days we've said that p-value is the probability of getting a value that far or farther if the null hypothesis were true. So I want to write one because your sample size is included in there if you interpret it. And just to be clear, if I take the time to write an interpret sentence, what does that usually mean?
It's going to be on the
It's going to be on the test script. So we talked about what it is. So it's under the assumption that what happens, that what is what? So if the null hypothesis is true, then there is a whatever percent chance of having a sample of with that given statistic. This sounds a lot wordier than it is. The way I'm wording it. Now, that last part, farther slash higher slash lower, if we're doing a less than one, it would be the probability of getting that number or lower. In general, it's probability of that number or farther, but you can write it depending on which direction it is. Thank you. That would be helpful. So interpret p-values. If the null hypothesis really is true, there's a whatever percent chance of having a sample of this size with this value. One thing we should probably talk about converting from a percent to a decimal, because clearly that's an issue. If I write something like 2.4%, what is 2.4% of the decimal? 0.024, or you could move the decimal 2 places from where it was. So here, moved it 2 to be 0.024. So going back to our example from Friday that I keep talking about, on Friday, we talked about the person running, and they had an X bar of 5.25 minutes. And I think we ended up with a p-value of 0.079, it was 2 or something like that. And in our second one, our sample size was 2. So this would be what was the null hypothesis in our situation from Friday? So if he really did run a 5-minute mile, if it really is true that he ran a 5-minute mile, there is what would be here? 7.92% chance of having a sample of what is this? Of 2, I guess kind of say all this together. 2 what? Context. 2 what? We took 2 what on Friday? 2 of his runs, 2 of his mile runs. So the chance of having a sample of 2 of his runs with, or 2 of his runs with a mean of 5.25 or higher is that answer. So if it really was true that he ran a 5-minute mile, there's a 7.92% chance of him having a sample of 2 miles with a mean of 5.25 or higher. So it's the only thing that when I talked about p-value before is we just had when I said getting a value of this far or extreme, specifically to the fact that we took a sample of that size. So it would need to be added in. You would just say farther because it is directional. The question was for people who aren't online, so they can't hear other people as well. If it's to tail, you would just say or farther as opposed to a direction. Let's look at one from homework without, if somebody has it out, hopefully without being able to have to get too much into that. So like the problem about ammonia nitrate, was that the one from the homework? And it's a not equal to? Okay, so in that one, we end up getting a p-value of, it should be 0.0456. And that one, our sample mean was 2.5125. So this would be if it really is true that the mean concentration of ammonia nitrogen is 2.3 milligrams per liter. You could write if H sub 0 mu equals 2.3 milligrams per liter really is true, there is a 4.56% chance of having a sample of 8, what was this one talking about? 8 samples with what's our sample statistic word? Mean of 2.5125 or what? Farther because it's a two-tone. So questions on interpreting p-value.
So the second number is always going to be the same.
Yeah, so before the quiz, this is going to be mean and this is going to be x bar. After the quiz, this could be proportion and this could be p hat, but yes. And y'all might want to write that in there of what you asked with sample statistic is either mean or proportion. And the number is either your x bar or your p hat. All right, so I want to make sure I covered this. I want to make sure I covered this in the video. We talked about you don't need to rewrite. I don't think y'all need to write this because I think y'all all got this. I'm making the decision that the p-value versus the alpha, it either is what symbol, inequality. When I get to right before conclude, I want to know if my p-value is what alpha. Or not less than. If it is less than, then I do what? What did I call this one? So there are questions on the quiz where I say something like, is it statistically significant? With the number that we just went over from the homework, our p-value was 0.0456, our alpha was 0.01. So for that problem with the concentration of ammonium nitrate, nitrogen, was it statistically significant? So the homework problem we just did on ammonium nitrogen, where our p-value was 0.0456, our alpha was 0.01, was it statistically significant? No. No. And if I said, is it and why, you would say no, because what? P-value is not less than alpha. That's all you would say. 0.0456 is not less than 0.01. So is it statistically significant? Yes or no? Why? One of those two. And either p-value is less than alpha or p-value is not less than alpha. And I asked that either once or twice on the quiz.